Welcome back to Telling the Bees. I'm so grateful to everyone who's listened to the first episode. It actually really does mean the world to me. So thank you so much. I struggled a lot with sort of pivoting to audio, pivoting to video, doing a podcast, a limited special dispatch podcast, as this is. But like I said in the first one, I think there are some things that need to be long form. And honestly, I really, really loved the experience of just talking, like ranting and raving for an hour. I was surprised that it was that easy, but at the same time, I'm worried now because I know how long it took me to edit the all of the likes and pauses out of the conversation. So I appreciate everyone who stuck with me. Before I get into The White Lotus and Love is Blind, I will say that this episode will have chapters from the beginning. Spotify said that they would upload them automatically, and that clearly was not the case. I had to edit them in myself after a couple of days, so appreciate everyone who was patient on that front. But this time, I'll make sure that they're in when I actually upload the episode. This week, we're talking about ugly discourse, the great unified theory of ugliness, and I think a lot of people are sort of talking about this in my corner of the web. I will say, like I said last week, I'm on Black Talk, I'm on Lesbian Talk, I'm on Queer Talk, I'm on all the different talks. I consume a lot of discourse. I read a lot of other people's opinions. I do a lot of social research. So I like knowing what other people are saying so that I can formulate my own opinions, right? It's that typical debate thing of knowing how to construct an argument, right? You have to know what the opposition is going to say before you can construct your own argument, or in the process of constructing your own argument, right? So I always want to seek out what other people are saying. I'm also very messy. If you follow me, you know that. We're literally talking about Love is Blind here. I am messy. I like knowing what's going on. I like knowing what's going on in all of these different sub-communities. I don't think it's appropriate to say who this is about, but if you follow Black Talk, you know that there are a couple of very prominent leftists, right? So who envision themselves as people who envision themselves as activists. When I say, you could hear the sort of snark in my voice when I say envision themselves as activists. I've made posts over the last 3 years saying that if you do not actually do activism, it is hard to call yourself an activist, right? I think a lot of internet leftists spend a lot of time dragging other people for their choices and what they do. And when you actually ask them what they do for their communities, it's always some combination of posting and infographics, right? And I think on TikTok, people have moved beyond the infographic to just yelling at other people for not having the exact same opinion that they have. So I take all of these leftists with a grain of salt. Obviously, on Black Talk last month or during Christmas, we had the whole thing with that girl who said that Beyonce was a propagandist, and it turned into a whole scandal and a whole situation. Last week, we saw further discourse where actually, I should have receipts for this, but I think the spirit of what I'm talking about is more important than the actual data backups of me posting TikToks of them fighting. There's so much lore and there's so much stuff in the background that I'm realizing now is hard to explain if you're not engaging with these online spaces. On Black TikTok, there are a couple of people who are very prominent voices, right? They are activists. They love to post, let's say. And one of them said something about the president and how the liberals were going to be celebrating his recent announcement about Gaza, which, if you follow, you know is not good. And someone else asked her for receipts. She said, why would liberals be celebrating this horrific thing that the president said? They sort of got into it, but then one of the people has a much, much larger account. She has a very large following. So she said, I am not going to engage with this person who I believe is mentally ill. It turned into a conversation about ableism. But anyway, at the final turn of this discourse, which is where we come in, one of the girls just randomly popped up out of nowhere and said, and what if I told you that I blocked her because she was ugly? What then? And it sort of spiraled into a whole separate discourse where now people are like, you can't call this girl ugly. It is inappropriate to call people ugly. It is rude to call people ugly. And especially if one of the people is disabled, is it okay to ever call someone ugly? So that brings us to the politics of ugliness. In 2015, when I was very young, created or coined or tweeted about, and I actually got in trouble for, I tweeted about the grand unified theory of ugliness, where I will also caveat, I was a very different person. I had not been to therapy. I was very mentally ill. This was, if you know me, you know me. I was very unwell. So do not listen to what I'm saying. I'm just saying that this is how some people, when they are unhealed, think. The grand unified theory of ugliness said that people who are truly ugly will never know that they're ugly because everyone around them will seek to protect them from that truth, right? It's kind of rude and fucked up for people to know that they are considered unattractive in society. So all of their friends will be like, oh my God, no, you're not. You're so cute. And the truly ugly are people who are just normal and have very low self-esteem, right? And I think with that, I was trying to capture this idea that a lot of people just have really low self-esteem and they have convinced themselves that they are ugly, which fucks up their actual ability to move on in society and, all of the benefits of having high self-esteem, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think I was onto something, but I do think I was seeking to like explain why so many people who are normal have such low self-esteem and why people who are quote unquote normal, quote unquote ugly are, sort of shielded from this. But now, obviously, I have 2 degrees. I've gotten 2 degrees since then. I think a lot deeper about things. And I think that in that space, I was sort of trying to explain my own low self-esteem. It would be a little bit of a cop-out if I just said like the obvious sociological answer, right? That when you are calling someone ugly, you're actually just sort of weaponizing what society expects people to look like, right? And so it's kind of obvious, but like you can't just go around calling people ugly. If it is kind of obvious, but unfortunately it is true, you cannot go around calling people ugly. It is a little bit racist. It is a little bit ableist, right? The whole idea of who gets to be ugly, who's allowed to be ugly, what does it mean to be ugly? All of this is very specifically tied to very, very old modes of white supremacy and very racist and fatphobic and ableist standards, right? And I think if you go back and you Google the ugly laws where disabled people weren't allowed to like be outside in American society, things that are really, really unfortunate and things that are very, very, dark parts of American history, it's hard to then turn around and sort of call someone who is disabled ugly. Like, I think that girl was sort of being intentionally rude. She was sort of being intentionally provocative, obviously, right? But I do think that at its core, it is something that is never going to be okay, right? I think of the Real Housewives of Orange County, where season 11, where Shannon and Kelly Dodd have that dinner or that breakfast, they're sitting outside. And Shannon says, you can't just go around calling people ugly. And Kelly's like, why not? She is ugly. And it makes me laugh, but it's also so cruel, right? Like it was cruel for Kelly Dodd to come on that show and call everyone ugly and then just sort of stand 10 toes down on it because she was wielding this very, very ancient tactic of just like attacking another woman's looks. And while it is funny, it's funny because it's provocative. It's funny because it's like fucked up. It's funny because it's sort of that unexpected laugh, right? If you like study humor, there's all those different types of laughs. And it might have been punching up because Kelly Dodd is racialized, right? I think one of her parents is Mexican. And she was just calling all of these identical blonde women ugly. But at the same time, it's shocking because it's one woman just calling another woman ugly on national television. It's just an insult that you really don't hear anymore. The New York Times last week published this book about ugliness, and I will put the name in the show notes. And basically, I found myself kind of scratching my head when I was reading the review of it, because it's sort of, again, this idea of this racialized person, this woman of color, this Afghani woman. I think she was Afghani. I will double check. But this woman of color growing up in Germany, and she's like, my face was so ugly, I couldn't stand looking at my nose. And I'm like, sweetie, you just live in a white country, right? Like, again, it seems very simplistic for me to say you're not ugly, you're just living in a white country when I live in the United States of America. So I cannot speak to her experience, but I do think that devoting a lot of time and a lot of attention to the study of ugliness is fascinating because it's always going to come down to the same few things, right? It's always going to be like living in a white supremacist country. It's always going to be, these are the ideals that are upheld. These are the ideas that society sort of protects and deems as important. These are the identities that society deems important and protects. And so you have to decide whether you want to live in that mode or not. And I do think it's interesting when we go back to the discourse of, these young Black women just calling each other ugly. It's kind of shocking. And like, I think in an intra-community sense, it is an intra-community discussion, but I do think that unfortunately, and you guys know, if you follow me, you can never use your identity as a shield. If you fucked up, you fucked up. And just you being disabled or Black or a woman or et cetera does not protect you from sort of being accountable for the fucked up things you say. But like, I fear that this girl did fuck up a little bit. I think that I don't know the extent of this other woman's disability, but I don't think you can go around calling people ugly. That being said, my book rec for the week, if you do want to read about the sort of experience of being othered, and not in a racialized sense, because again, I mean, if you do, I will put the link to that book in the show notes, but the book that I read 2 books. So for my book club, we read Truth and Beauty by Ann Patchett a couple of months ago, and it was incredibly beautiful. If you follow me, you know that I'm an Ann Patchett head. That is mother, that is queen. She writes beautifully about the human experience, and she's very sardonic and very wry. She just understands the human experience in a very specific sense as sort of an outsider who's an insider, right? She's a pretty white woman who understands the privileges that she's been given, but she also is able to see like I'm not very funny. I'm not very special. I just am able to write very well and very quickly, and that's given me a lot of success. And I do think she is a lot more humble than I would be if I was her, but she's great. And so she wrote about her experience being friends with this woman when she was at Iowa, the graduate program. If you do not follow and you do not watch Girls, there's a very, very, very esteemed writers program in Iowa. A lot of people just call it Iowa. It's the Iowa Writers Workshop. And when she was at Iowa, she became best friends with this girl, Lucy Greeley, whose face underwent a series of surgeries due to a cancer that she had when she was a little girl. So because of this cancer, it was like eating away at a corner of her face. She had multiple surgeries to sort of fix the face, but it was always, the cancer would always sort of eat away at the flesh around. So she was missing a portion of her jaw, and she went through many, many, many surgeries in her life to fix that injury in her jaw and that sort of hole in her face. And it was very, very sad. Autobiography of a Face is Lucy Greeley's memoir, which is incredibly beautiful. It is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. I read it when I was like 24, and it just sort of broke my heart. And sort of tying into the low self-esteem thing, I think I was seeking out literature to understand why I just felt like shit about myself. And I think that book was really, really beautiful and really sort of instrumental in making me realize that when you are filled with lack, you will never sort of fill it unless you do the work, right? And the experiences that Lucy wrote about, being incredibly charismatic, being revered, being beloved by everyone in her life, but still being unable to sort of ever access that emotion or access that feeling because all she ever felt was ugly, was very sad. And on the flip side, Anne Patchett's memoir about their friendship, sort of seeing that she was so loved and that she was there for her when Lucy was struggling with her addiction, was very, very sort of hard to read, right? Because you're getting both experiences. You're getting Lucy's experience from when she was a little girl all the way up to her adulthood. The memoir was published right before she died, or a couple of years before she died, when she finally saw the success that she had been craving. She was a beautiful writer, but she was not a hard-working writer. She liked to sort of conjure things from nothing and receive the benefits. Whereas Anne Patchett is a workhorse. She will like lock herself in her room for months and just bang it out and publish. And I think that's why there was some enmity there between the two of them, even though they were best friends, of course, it's one of those things. But yeah, seeing both of their books in conversation with each other is very interesting because, again, Anne Patchett was having this experience of being friends with this incredibly dynamic, interesting person. And Lucy couldn't see any of the good things in her life. All she could ever think about was ugliness and how men, and it's like all she could think about was how men didn't want her, but that wasn't even true. She was very promiscuous in a way that I was like, okay, Miss Catholic Anne. Anne Patchett was very judgmental of her and was very nasty about the way that Lucy conducted her personal life, if I do say so myself. Obviously, this was published 30 years ago, so don't go drag Anne Patchett now. But it was very interesting reading it and understanding Anne Patchett's Catholic sensibilities as she was talking about Lucy Greeley, hooking up with all of these guys and all of these like single guys and married guys and guys everywhere. So yeah, it can't even be this experience of Lucy saying, I didn't feel wanted by men, because it wasn't even that. And going back to what I was saying earlier, this idea of lack comes in again, where even though Lucy was getting attention from men, there was nothing that was going to fill this void within her. And I think, honestly, it's really sad to read about. But I will still recommend it. It's an incredible book. It's one of the best books I've ever read in my life. Sort of, when I think about all of these conversations about ugliness, I also think about something I wrote a couple of months ago. I think it was either June or August, but I called it The Pretty Problem. And it was this idea where on TikTok, all of these kids are so obsessed with what they look like, and all they can talk about and all they can post about is how to be hotter. And I need to lose 50 pounds and then I'll be hot, and I'm going to get balayage, and I'm going to do my nose, and I'm going to do my lips, and I'm going to get muscles. It's like cross-genderal, it's cross-racial, it's everyone. It's getting really weird. Instagram had, pretty detrimental effects on people's self-esteem, depending, right? I think everyone is built different. Everyone is built different. I think everyone is built different. Everyone is built differently. Your tolerance for seeing certain things is different. And so maybe not everyone is incredibly affected by seeing other people on social media, but some people are. And I think that the younger you are, the more that you are. I think that children having all of these examples of these incredibly sexy, beautiful, hot people all of the time is really warping their idea of what it means to exist in the world as a person, and like what they need to look like to be considered hot or sexy or beautiful, right? And like I wrote in The Pretty Problem, there are so many people, like if you go outside, there are people who are normal, who are not obviously Madison Beer or like the hottest IG baddie you've ever seen, who like have sex and they have boyfriends and they have lives, right? You don't necessarily need to be 6'3" and cut and have these like giant muscles cut in terms of abs, these giant muscles to exist in the world. And a lot of people just don't realize that algorithmic social media rewards one type of beauty. So they think they have to fit the algorithm's perception of beauty instead of finding beauty in other people, right? They don't know how to understand that other people are attractive if they do not look like what this expectation is. And I think that's why we got things like the Rat Boy and why is Jeremy Allen White hot and why is so-and-so hot, because they think that everyone has to look like this very specific thing. And it is, again, coming back to this conversation about who gets to be hot and is it racialized and etc. Like Jeremy Allen White is a little bit short and a little bit ugly, but he's charismatic, right? He has something about him that draws people to him. And I think that's something I've talked about on TikTok as well. Not everything is able to be quantified. Not everything is able to be explained by zeros and ones and the binary of the algorithm where you get to decide people's careers just because you want to fuck them or not. And unfortunately, I'm glad that I don't know if we are moving away from that era. I do think that there are starting to be some more interesting faces in Hollywood again, but I will also say that I think those are mostly men, and I do think that there is a definite preference for like a little bit of a weird looking man versus a weird looking woman. A couple of years ago when Curtis Sittenfeld released Romantic Comedy, which was all about this idea of, you know, an unattractive woman sleeping with an attractive man, and everyone was freaking out about it in the fictional world of the novel. She worked for SNL and he was a famous actor in the novel. And I made a couple of posts where I was saying like, it's so common and accepted in society for like an unattractive man to have a very, very hot girlfriend. And even in the gay community, it's very like, if the guy's rich, it's not a question of why this person is dating this person. You understand very clearly and very easily why these two people are together. But on TikTok, it's always the most shocking, confusing thing. They're like, why is she with him? This is something we've been seeing as long as we've been alive. I think I forgot sometimes that on TikTok, a lot of the people are very young, so they don't understand a lot of things. And it sort of sucks to explain to them that this is the way that the world works and that sometimes your attractiveness doesn't explain everything about you, that sometimes you can be cool and smart and interesting without necessarily teenagers wanting to think that you're the hottest person alive, or sometimes you just want to catch a vibe, right? I think that there's a lot more to be said there, but I'm going to leave it at that. I think height 15, a tight, whatever, however long this has been going on ugliness and this idea of, are you allowed to call people ugly on social media? No, that is the takeaway. Do not. It is never ever going to come off the way that you want it to, unless you are in the exact same position, right? If you were both white women calling each other ugly, fine. I will leave you to it. I think that you cannot call someone disabled ugly. I fear there's just so many loaded implications behind it that it's never ever going to come across the way that you want it to come across. It's always going to be seen as cruel and punching down. And one of the rules of humor is to punch up, right? You don't want to punch down. Moving on to White Lotus, we have to talk about theory culture before I get into this episode. Episode 2, theory culture. I posted about this on TikTok. Lord, we have to wrap it up. Everyone, it's hard because, you know, we see all of these stats about people saying, oh, most of the country only has a 6th grade reading level. And I say, we can tell. I fear it's getting really scary. It's getting really spooky. A lot of people are posting nonsense. I will just say it. I'll say it out loud. The fact they were like, Lori is Portia's mom. Why is Lori Portia's mom? Because they both have bobs. She's not Portia's mom. This episode debunked it. This episode debunked the idea that this is a prequel. This episode debunked the idea that this is happening at the same time as Sicily. Why would Greg/Gary be flying from Sicily to Thailand and then telling people he lived there for a year when the most obvious, like Occam's razor, guys, the most obvious explanation is that this is happening a year after Sicily? And Belinda recognized him. She wouldn't recognize him if she had been seeing him for the first time or if this was happening at the same time as Sicily. I really don't understand where these theories are coming from. I talked about this during House of the Dragon as well. The theories need to come from within the text. They need to be supported, right? I think saying, oh, the monkeys did it could be interesting because we keep seeing shots of the monkeys and there's something interesting there, but just making something up wholesale, whole cloth, whatever the expression is, and saying, this is what I think, right? Someone on Reddit is saying Greg and Belinda are working together. They're competing to get Tanya's money. And I said, sweetie, where would you get this? Why would you say this? Like, how would this even work? Nothing about Belinda's character is showing us that she's an international spy/assassin seeking revenge on Tanya, right? The whole point of the White Lotus season 1 was to show that she was disappointed by the fickle ways of this fickle rich woman, not that she was going to convert into an assassin like fucking Angelina Jolie and go chase down Tanya's fortune for herself. Like, what are we doing here? We're seeing the same thing with the longtime friends where people are like, she overheard them. That's why she was talking about them. And it's like, No, it was very obvious from all of their interactions that these three women do not like each other. And the way that they're going to drag each other every time the third woman leaves the room is the text, right? Like that is obvious. This week, we see Lori and Kate pair off. We also see Jacqueline and Kate pair off. Next week, I'm sure that we'll get Lori and Jacqueline pairing off. But it is in the text, it is on the episode, it is on the screen. Why are you making something up out of nothing and just saying this is what I think is going to happen? The episode starts off with my queens, the longtime friends, still talking shit. Jacqueline calling Kate out, saying, oh, I thought you said she looked great after she said she looked defeated. This is who the show should be about, honestly. There's a lot going on, I feel like, this season, but I do love them. I think this plot line is the strongest, and I just think it's like where he's really letting himself shine. I think Mike White loves to write very mean, very rich people, which is something that we all love. We're all very excited by. It's why we're watching the show. I'm not as into the murder mystery stuff as a lot of people are. I think that the murder mystery is the vehicle. I think it sells really well. I think people will say, I just read an interview where this author said, oh, I couldn't sell my book, so I put a murder in it and it sold in 6 weeks. And I said, yeah, that tracks. I think people love the murder mystery stuff, but it's not necessarily why everyone is watching. I'm not interested in the theorizing. I'm not interested in guessing like who's dead and why they did it, because I think it will be revealed. I think it's a valid reason for watching the show, but I was always watching the show to see the rich characters be mean to each other and sort of the class politics and the class dynamics. I think it's much more interesting as a like study of humanity, which is why I do everything right, which is why I study sociology, why I read so much, why I watch so much reality TV. I think the study of humanity is so much more interesting than like who done it and why done it, right? Anyway, I love that Jacqueline, before talking shit, makes a point to call Kate out. I think that will come up again. They immediately resume dragging when she says, oh, I thought you said she looked great, after Kate says that Lori looks defeated. Again, like I said earlier, we debunk that she is Portia's mom myth, because they say that her daughter's name is Ellie and she's a little kid, right? She might have ODD. I would get that diagnosis checked out. In case you don't know, ODD is oppositional defiance disorder. And it is, I don't know if women actually get diagnosed with it, but I feel like I've read about it, and some of the symptoms include throwing furniture at teachers. I know someone who threw a chair at their teacher and they did not turn out well. Oh my God, I'm being poisoned by the longtime friends. Look at me gossiping now. I really enjoyed seeing the specific character moments in the morning. I think that they're doing a very specific job of setting up each character and showing us how they interact with this wellness, right? I said on TikTok that wellness is all about expunging the bad and letting in the good, right? And so this idea of them participating in all of these routines in these ways is fascinating, because it's telling you so much about their character without necessarily having it be dialogue or just a conversation between two people or sort of force fed to us, right? I think a lot of these conversations are very subtle, and there's also very subtle character work happening in them. And I appreciate that this is something outside of that. So it's also a character building moment without it being the sort of ping pong combo between two people. And also, I think something that's specific about this in these moments in the morning is that we're seeing a lot of the work that goes into creating this experience for these people, right? Like, we see them laying the bed, we see them cleaning, we see them sort of dressing up the resort for everyone before everyone gets out of bed, because they want people to think that this is all effortless and, you know, invisible. And Mike White wants us to see that it is not, right? There are people here. I wonder if this is a response to the critique that, you know, the show was very white and we're not seeing enough of the perspective of the staff, because this is still not the perspective of the staff. This is showing that these people are, it's kind of reinforcing the invisibility if all we see from them is them sort of cleaning in the morning, right? And I'm not talking about characters like Amrita, Gaitok, and Mook, right? Who are, you know, who have names and plot lines. I'm talking about the people really in the background, like the woman who was giving Saxon his massage and had to contend with his filth. She does not get a name, and she's also sort of being subjected to this darkness. Moving on to Timothy Ratliff, I do wonder if there's an importance to him saying, you know how I feel about drugs, that he doesn't like taking drugs. I wonder if that'll come up again. In the episode preview, we see him popping pills, and I said, Lord, that's Victoria's influence. She's getting him hooked. In the conversation with Kate, where we see, again, the intersection of two of these character group plot lines, I thought it was incredible. Parker Posey just absolutely being shut down. She was having none of it. She did not want to talk to that lady, which I laughed at. I don't think there's anything deeper going on there. I genuinely think it is just her either not remembering her or not wanting to speak to her. But again, this is a character moment, right? It's showing us how closed off Victoria is. This family is so insular and so weird. Get another glimpse of that later when she's talking to the kids and she says, you know, you guys are all you have. We're so rich and so hot. You have to be careful. People want what you have, right? She's maintaining this idea of them as a unit, of them as sort of buttressed from the outside by attacking forces. And I think that's interesting because it happened twice in this episode that she wanted to call out the fact that everyone else, it's very Game of Thrones, right? Everyone who isn't us is an enemy. I thought it was interesting that she also, the actress is prostitutes, because I think it's an echo of Saxon saying weird stuff too, right? This is a family that's very proper and is very like obsessed with propriety, but then at the same time, they'll say off-color stuff to each other all the time, right? Even the mom, who you think would be the last one to say something inappropriate, like just bringing up both slut shaming and shaming sex workers is weird in and of itself, but then saying it to her kids, it's like, oh, not this. The next thing that I wanted to call out is Rick's conversation with Amrita when he says, "Nothing comes from nothing. I am nothing." I thought it was fascinating. I thought, is this low self-esteem? If anyone remembers Coke Talks, my queen, R.I.P., I don't think she's dead. I just think she stopped posting. Coke Talks would always talk about narcissism, and one of the facets of narcissism was how a lot of these men who dated women who were much younger than them were secretly narcissists because they could no longer sell the illusion, right? When you are dating someone your own age, they understand exactly who you are, right? If you are 37 and you are telling a 37-year-old woman, oh, I don't necessarily have my finances where they should be, or I'm living in this sort of shitty place and my job isn't where it should be, they immediately understand where you are and they're able to assess you on the same level. Whereas a young person isn't able to understand the difference, right? And that's why we see so much age gap discourse on TikTok, because the people in these relationships are like the frogs in the pot. They don't realize that the water is turning up. When you're in it, you can't see it from the outside, right? If you're 23 and your boyfriend is 37, you're not going to wonder why your boyfriend is living at home and why his paycheck is being garnished for his lady mamas, right? But when you are 37, you can immediately realize like, oh, that's really fucking weird. Why aren't you getting your life together, right? I think about Rick having this incredibly low self-esteem and dating this much younger girl. And I think, of course, it perfectly tracks, right? He feels like shit about himself. And he's also dating this girl because he is able to pretend to be someone else with her versus having to pretend to be someone else with himself, right? Like when he's looking in the mirror, does he know the truth or is he delusional? And I think this conversation was very clear that he is not delusional. He knows exactly what he is. And he's sort of acting out this dynamic of hating himself on everyone else. And I don't think it's just hating himself. I think he's a misanthrope, right? I think I saw on Reddit that people were talking about, oh my God, who else loves their dynamic? And I'm going to post about it tomorrow, where I guess this will be out by the time. Anyway, I'm posting about it on TikTok because I think it's weird and I think it's a cultural thing. I don't think it's surprising that American women or like an American woman on Reddit is like, guys, this is so cute, right? This idea of this incredibly grumpy, nasty old man with this very, very, very young girl. And the idea that she's healing him, she's fixing him with her love is very American. It's very American gender norms. It's, again, this idea that we've seen a million times on TV and in movies before that, like, he's mean to everyone, but he's not mean to me. I think that if you were dating a man who acts like this, I'm worried. And I think that if he's mean to everyone, he's going to be mean to you, right? He calls her dumb. He's not necessarily super nice to Chelsea. And I think that that's a red flag. We see Mook and Guy Talk finally having their talk, and he asks her out. She sort of baits him into asking her out, and then she still says no, which is a little cruel. I will say, I think Mook should have let him down properly instead of letting it linger.mp3. It's interesting that she didn't say the words, I do not like you and I do not want to date you, because I think if you have social skills, it's very obvious, right? She doesn't like him. To him, it sounds like she's listing reasons that they should be together, right? Our families know each other. We're from the same town. We work at the same place. But to her, she's listing them as reasons why she doesn't like him and she will never want to be with him, right? Our families know each other. We work at the same place. We're from the same town. She is intrigued by the bodyguards of Hollinger. She clearly wants a different life for herself. So I'm thinking maybe it's a gender thing where he's just not really understanding that she doesn't like him because he is so into her. But it's definitely something that should be checked out. The last thing I'll say about White Lotus, I think this was obviously a setup episode. I think it was really interesting. I have seen people saying it's slow. I'm intrigued by all of the character elements still, so I'm not going to, jump the gun and call it slow. I think it's still doing a really good job of teasing all of these interesting character moments and all of these character dynamics. I'm so ready for more. With the robbery, people are saying Valentina is in on it because he was distracting Guy Talk, obviously, right? Like, that's not a theory, that's the text. I think something weird is going on with him and longtime friends. I'm interested by it, but I do believe that it is sort of telegraphed that Lori is going to kind of go after him, but then Jacqueline is going to like undercut her. She's going to steal him. I think Kate is very involved in upholding the image of herself as like good married lady. I think every time the way she has to, preface all of her shit talking with, well, I love her, but she's such a good person, but, right? So she's not gonna, I don't think she's gonna do anything sexually improper, but I do think Jacqueline and Lori are gonna end up entangled in some psychic warfare for Mr. Valentine. And he was also not really hitting on Kate, right? He told her that her body metrics were average, sending her into a spiral. But yeah, I think something will definitely go on between the two of them. And he's obviously in on the robbery, you guys. Like we have to lock in a little bit. Moving on to Love is Blind. These episodes are so bad, you guys. I am so sad about this show. I used to love this show and now I'm like sludging through it. It's not giving. I think this cast is really uninterested. Someone on Reddit, there was an interesting comment that said that the reason that people don't want to go on this show is because of the way that this fandom is so intensely obsessed with researching everyone who goes on and like digging up all their tea and digging up all their dirt. I have two things to say about this sort of situation later on. Starting off with Daniel and Taylor, I think we're going to have to say it. We're going to have to say it out loud. I'm sorry if you were one of these people. Please do not be offended. I think Taylor is a little bit of a loser for having a follower app and seeing who follows her and unfollows her. Like, girl, you're not an influencer yet. You're a nurse from Minneapolis. Why do you care who unfollows you? Sorry if that seems unnecessarily harsh. I think we are living in an age of anxiety. I think we're living in an age of social media induced anxiety because honestly, who gives a shit? She's in her 30s. Who cares if someone unfollowed you? Like, I think we need to speak truth to power and just call these people losers in the moment. Like if one of my friends was like, I have an app that tells me every single time someone unfollows me, and I know every time, I would be like, okay, who cares? Who cares? Literally, what is this? And her having to like treat this as a secret. I feel bad because everyone was like, oh my God, women's intuition. And then she was wrong. So it just made her look like an idiot. It would be hard for me to take that L. So I feel bad for her in that sense because, everyone was like, I was so eager for her to be proven right. That would have been much more interesting than what we actually got. Because what we got was a reveal of her being sort of an insecure loser. It's hard for people to hear that. And I stand with you. And I understand that that is a difficult moment and a difficult statement to say out loud and to hear said about you. But I do think that if you are this invested in social media and you need to know who's unfollowing you. Like, I think there's a whole outcropping of anxious behavior that is normalized and is actually terrifying, right? I think Find My Friends is terrifying. I think having to check where everyone is and it reassures you, it's not actually reassuring you. You are activating your anxiety and soothing the anxiety with the same mechanism that activated it, right? And that's specifically thinking about a dating influencer that I used to follow who's like, I have to look at where everyone is on my phone at all times. I think it's creepy. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, well, this is a gendered thing and you have to worry about your friends. But I think worrying about your friends on a Friday night at 11 o'clock and seeing, okay, let me make sure that like Sarah got home safe is very different than like on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. looking at your phone and seeing where everyone is. I don't think that that's the same behavior. Like Sheena on Vanderpump Rules has like 50 people's locations, and that doesn't surprise me. She's obsessed with what other people think of her. She's obsessed with having other people's information. She's obsessed with other people's tea. She's obsessed with calling other people out. I think all of these traits are sort of correlated. I'm not saying that it's, one and the same, but I'm saying it's correlated. It doesn't surprise me that Taylor was actively, identifying as like an overthinking girly and saying, I ruin relationships by thinking about them too much. And she also has a follower app. Like the two things are completely correlated. And that's all I'll say because I feel bad. I can go on tangents where I just drag these people. But with Virginia and Devin are saying when they're in Honduras, are saying that Devin is her best friend is crazy to me when they have known each other for 10 days, right? Like 10 days maximum, depending on when they propose, right? Because sometimes if you like propose early, then you're just sitting around waiting for the show to decide that you can propose according to the behind the scenes interviews and the behind the scenes tea. So this is unfortunately the subtitle for the Love is Blind section was going to be straight nonsense because this is straight nonsense. On Substack and on TikTok 2 weeks ago at this point, I talked about should your partner be your best friend discourse. And I said, no, your partner shouldn't be your best friend. Your partner should be one of your best friends, but they can't be your best friend. And again, Virginia's just buying into this very traditional heteronormative thing that like Devin is her best friend. And I'm like, this man that she's known for 10 days, they have no history together. They have no memories together. Literally all they did was talk to each other through a wall. And she's like, he's my best friend. I think that this idea that has been sold to a lot of people on social media that like, you have to marry your best friend or just saying my partner is my best friend. I don't think your partner has to be your best friend. And I don't think your partner should be your best friend. I think you should have someone to vent to. And Esther Perel, this is what I said on TikTok, Esther Perel, the person who wrote, the incredibly famous psychotherapist who wrote The State of Affairs, said that placing all of your burdens on one person is a lot of strain for a relationship and for a marriage, right? Wanting one person to be your best friend and your confidant and your co-executive chief of the household and your co-parent and your financial planner and your estate planner and your let me gossip about my friends to you person is a lot. It is a lot for one relationship to hold. Again, I'm not saying that your partner should not be your very, very intimate, close friends and that you guys shouldn't do all of this work together. But I'm also saying that once you introduce kids into the mix, once you have all of this other stuff with your families and your finances and all of everything is intermingled and intertwined, it is very hard for me to believe that a lot of these straight men who you guys are placing a lot of responsibility, a lot of these straight men who you guys are placing a lot of this stuff on are your actual best friends. I do not think that there is a level of reciprocity there that is sort of intimated when you say, this person is my best friend. And that's all I'll say on that. I wrote down no chemistry outside of Ben and Sarah. I don't think any of these people have sexual chemistry. Dave and Lauren, absolutely not. Joey and Monica, absolutely not. His reveal about OCD is interesting. I do wonder if that's going to come up again. The way that he treats it is sort of odd. It's sort of like the secret thing that he's bringing up to her. I will also say, I don't know who this was, either Monica or Virginia, saying that they want to crawl inside one another. Straight nonsense. Absolute straight nonsense. I think that's all that I wrote about the Honduras episodes because they were deeply boring. Moving on to Monica's sister. Oh, wait, one other straight nonsense thing that I will ask about. You guys can tell me if this is normal. When meeting each other's families, I was surprised by the number of like boyfriends and girlfriends that were there. This is an argument that I've had in real life too, where I think maybe this is my avoidant tendencies coming out, but I would be very surprised if I walked into someone's house and they're like, this is my family. And she's like, this is so-and-so. And this is so-and-so's boyfriend or girlfriend. I'm like, why are they here? I thought I was meeting your family. I don't want to meet your sister's boyfriend. What is this? And I think a lot of straight people are sort of conditioned into believing that this is just like the way things are done. But I would be like, this is a stranger. I'm sorry. And this is what I'm saying when I had these arguments where I always said that spending Thanksgiving and Christmas with other people's families was a little bit weird. And people always get mad at me. I don't fully take it back, but I don't fully stand by it either, because obviously things are different. If you don't plan on getting married and you've been together for 12 years and you have 5 kids, obviously that's different. Like, spend Christmas wherever you want. But I think that if you've been dating for 6 months and you're like, I'm spending Christmas with Joey, I would look at you a little weird. I'd say, where is your family? Why are you spending one of 3 major holidays that we have in this country with some stranger's family, right? And then I understand that you have to like ingratiate yourself into the family, and all of this is sort of pageantry of auditioning to be part of the family. And I think this is, again, gendered. I think that a lot of people have this expectation that the person that they bring into the family is going to seamlessly mix in, where I think a lot of men are a lot more like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And honestly, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's what causes a lot of tension with like and wives. So maybe, again, this is me speaking as a man, but I think I would be a little weirded out if I was meeting someone's family and they're like, sister's boyfriend was there. I'd be like, what the fuck is this? He's not part of the family. Anyway, Monica's sister, pure evil. I try not to speak too negatively about these people because they're, randoms, and she didn't audition to be up for the show, but I think she was relishing dragging the relationship a little bit too much. I don't know if she knows something about Monica, or she's sort of intimating things that we might not know or understand about her, because obviously she's her sister and we have only been getting 6 episodes or 7 episodes of her at this point. But just the way that she treated Joey was kind of weird. The way that she kept bringing up all of this stuff about Monica was really weird. Her like bringing up her type, saying your type is tall Italian men, not this man. I said, what is this girl trying to do? I was impressed by Joey sort of handling it very maturely, saying maybe she's jealous. I think that is a little bit simplistic, and I do think it's a little bit rude, but I don't think that Monica was especially offended, which is good. I just think it's odd that the sister was so activated and so intent on bringing their relationship down, right? Because even if it is, okay, she's jealous because she's the older sister and she's supposed to get married first, she has a boyfriend. It's not like she's sitting there completely despondent and she has nothing going on in her life. She literally has a guy. Like, yes, Monica's getting married before you, but Monica went on a TV show to meet her husband. Like, I wouldn't necessarily be super jealous of that situation, if you know what I'm saying. Dave and Lauren, Lord, Dave wants to blow this relationship up. This stuff with the ex is not really understandable. I loved the lesbian queens putting him in his place. I feel so sad for Lauren. She's sitting there silently crying, the way that he won't trust her or believe her or her friends. Like, he's putting so much stock in the words of his friends. Lauren was in a friends with benefits situation with a guy that his friends sort of know, right? Because Minneapolis is 7 people big. Everyone knows each other. Everyone went to high school together, blah, 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 blah. They know this guy that Lauren was dating. Apparently, he's come forward on TikTok. If you guys listen to my last episode, I don't really care about the like not extramarital, the extra credit drama that goes on around this show. If it's not on camera, I honestly do not want to deal with it because it is like, what are we doing here? I don't want to be enveloped in the like real life scandals of these people. But apparently this guy's a little freak. He like made a Love is Blind poster of himself and like did a podcast interview with someone's mom. And I said, oh girl, he clearly wanted to be on the show. He wants TV time. He's a psycho. And I think Lauren is kicking herself for dating him and sort of sleeping with him and now giving him this ability to sort of ruin her life. But Dave doesn't want to date her. Dave does not want to marry her. And I think the simplistic explanation would be that it is because she was intimate with this guy. But I do think there is something to be said there about his own nastiness and the way that he's weaponizing her shame, the way that he's consistently sort of making her feel bad about herself, the way that he's drilling down and saying, I can't trust you. I don't believe you. I can't trust you. I don't believe you, right? Over multiple episodes, he is saying that the words of his friends are more important than her words, right? And it's like, for me, thinking about the Gottman Institute and their research into trust and relationships, etc., he doesn't believe you. This relationship is over. And I think this speaks back to her insecurity that we talked about last week with the first 6 episodes. She is, again, another person who described herself as an overthinking girly, and I feel bad for her. But her saying, I'm so insecure, her weaponizing her insecurity and thinking that Molly was like trying to destroy her. I think that she is a deeply insecure person. I think she slept with this fucking loser because she's insecure. I think she picked Dave because she's insecure. And I think that Dave sort of weaponizing that, knowing that she's going to sit there and fight for the relationship and he does not give a fuck, is evil. Like it's bad. I don't think it's abusive. I saw someone on Reddit saying it's abusive. It's not abusive, right? He's a dickhead and a bad guy, but like it is not abuse. I think that we are allowed to call a spade and say this guy fucking sucks and he is a horrible partner. He's a horrible man, and I don't know why she still wants to marry him. With Devin and Virginia, them bringing up the prenup in front of the family was surprising to me because I did not think that they would. It seems like he's a little bit reticent about signing it. He is not sort of rushing into that. He's not loving that conversation. But I think she has a good head on her shoulders, and I think that she very much wants to protect herself. Like, she obviously has so much more money than him. She's obviously doing so much better than he is. And even her saying, I want to pay off your debt is really nice of her. I wouldn't. But him having to bring up the prenup in front of the family that his sister later brought up again was a little bit shady to me because it feels like he is wanting to drag his feet on it, and it comes up again next week and he just doesn't want to sign it. But if you're coming into the marriage with nothing and she's coming into the marriage with everything, why do you think that you're entitled to anything, right? It's weird. And I do think that it is like a gendered thing where he doesn't feel right that she's the one asking him, right? He's like, who are you to ask me to sign this prenup? But she's the one with the money. She's the one who's allowed. All in all, I think that all of these families are very intense. I think Taylor's family is so intense. They're so unpleasant. Daniel's family is really nice. But again, we see this again where I think his brother had her boyfriend there, or his brother had his girlfriend there. And there were just a lot of people in that room. And Taylor's family, them having this meeting of the minds, having to like give their blessing. A lot of straight nonsense, a lot of jumping through hoops. But again, this is Minnesota. These are people who are obsessed with what other people think of them. These are people who sort of crave the approval of these traditional family structures and these traditional family units, right? Like, it is very easy for me as a like gay coastal elite to be like, why do these people care so much what their families think? But I don't know. I think that there is a sort of penance that you pay when you are this close to your family, where you sort of entomb yourself in their expectations, right? Taylor is so caught up in what other people think of her. She's so sort of wrapped up in all of these expectations that I don't necessarily think would happen if this was set in a different city. Back to Dave and Lauren, I think Dave is making her feel like a tainted woman. And I think Lauren is a modern woman and he's punishing her for being modern. He's using this experience that she had, like a friends with benefits situation. She keeps saying, I didn't date him, I never dated him. And that's almost worse for him. He's using it as an albatross to punish her and hold it over her head. It's literally, it's the sword of Damocles sort of hanging over their relationship right now, where the way he's treating her is so disgusting because he's always going to be able to pull the rug and like walk out, right? Him saying, my friends are on standby because I don't know if we need them to come, because he still doesn't believe that she dated this guy, or that she was ready for marriage because she had sex with someone a couple of weeks before she went on the show. Who cares, right? Like, literally, who cares? I don't believe that he was fully celibate before going on the show. I think everyone has a past, everyone's an adult. And he is very, very insistent on this idea that she's dirty and evil for like hooking up some weird guy for a couple of weeks. He's treating her like she's a pariah. And I think if I was her, that would be my incentive to walk away. Like, she needs to be able to call it, because the way that he's treating her for this one, it's not even an infraction. She didn't even do anything. She didn't have an affair. She wasn't participating in an affair. She literally just hooked up with some guy that knew other people. Like, this is crazy when you say it out loud. She is so locked in on this guy that she can't even see, like, she can't even say it out loud to herself that this is bizarre psycho behavior. Wrapping up the episode with Ben and Sarah, I am going to take my L. I am going to say the hard thing. I'm taking my L in advance because, again, I think that this is a conversation that we've had a couple of times on TikTok. And I wrote about it in a piece called Antisocial Goods, which Jamel Bowie liked. I will shout myself out there. I think we are entering into an age of very intense digital surveillance. And obviously, I want to preface this by saying that, like, those Are We Dating the Same Guy Facebook groups and the gendered world that we live in, the gendered world of dating, where women have to protect themselves. Women obviously have to protect themselves from real and present dangers and threats. But I do think that there comes a time where this sort of gets a little bit questionable, right? Morally, ethically, just, I don't know if this is my reticence because I'm a man and I feel bad saying it, but like, I don't think that ghosting someone is a federal crime, right? I remember a time where if you went on 2 dates with someone and then they made a TikTok about you, they were crazy. Like, I think it's very weird for this girl to be saying that Ben is a serial manipulator and a liar and he's being rewarded for his bad behavior when they went on 2 dates and he ghosted her. I don't believe everything that he's saying. I'm not defending him. I'm not defending a man. All I am saying is that I think that people take the words of people who have been rejected very, very seriously, and they hold them up as this sort of font of truth. He didn't want to date her. People are allowed to not want to date you. People are allowed to break up with you. People are allowed to date other people. People are allowed to sort of be pieces of shit. And unfortunately, that's just the truth. That's America. That's life. That's dating, right? Like, even if he was a serial, I don't want to call him even if he was a serial dater where he was dating all these women and sort of treating them like shit, unfortunately, that's not a crime. It's not okay and it's not good, but it's not a crime. And like, this woman taking to TikTok to punish him and say, oh my God, how dare he go on this reality show? This woman taking to TikTok to tell her sad story about him leaving her and him ghosting her. She also acknowledges that it's an overreaction, but she's like weeping in tears and she says that it's been 4 years, right? I don't think that Sarah fully believes Ben, but I do think that it's an important conversation to have, that as more of us are conducting our lives online and like living lives digitally, no one is perfect. That's what I try saying. Everyone on TikTok, whenever the situation comes up, everyone is perfect. Everyone's never made a mistake. Everyone has never ever said a mean thing or ghosted someone or done something inappropriate. No one's ever made a mistake. And it's like, yeah, because you're fighting these armies of people who see themselves as righteous, right? Like, all of these people, this is my beef with the anxious attachment community, with the like anxious daters. All of these people see themselves as like good and righteous and pure because all they want is boyfriends and husbands, and everything that they do is perfect because it is in pursuit of this overall greater good. But that doesn't make you a good person, right? When you go to therapy, they tell you that being anxiously attached is not necessarily good. It is an insecure attachment style. Both being anxious and being avoidant are bad. And no one on the internet seems to acknowledge this because the anxious have won the internet. The anxious have won all forms of discourse around dating because they see themselves as like paragons of goodness because they want a boyfriend. And it's like, some guys just don't want to date you. Some guys are going to ghost you. Some guys are going to treat you like shit. And it fucking sucks. It sucked for me. I spent my whole 20s dating guys who hated me. I've been ghosted so many times. I've dated guys who treat me like shit. I've dated dozens of guys who treated me like shit. And I'm still going to defend the right of people to treat each other like shit versus exposing each other on the internet for being a little bit mean to you, right? I wish that this was a perfect world, and I wish that everyone was a perfect angel who never ever made mistakes. But I think that this sort of being wrapped up in the idea of yourself as someone who never ever makes mistakes and never ever has treated someone else badly in a dating situation is not realistic. It is not realistic, and you are setting yourself up for failure. I also think that, this is going back to my like usual argument, if you're permanently stuck in a victim position and you are seeing yourself as the victim of all of these evil men who do all of these evil things to you, you're going to date people. It's a numbers game, right? You're going to date people who are bad, right? That's just what the dating pool looks like right now. I appreciate Sarah standing up. I'm not standing up for Ben, but I appreciate Sarah standing up to Ben and saying that this is a much more nuanced conversation, that she doesn't believe him. I don't really believe him either. I think he's trickling the information down to her. Again, maybe my rant was a little bit impassioned, but I do think it's a nuanced conversation to have around the way that people treat each other. And I don't think that necessarily ghosting someone warrants a TikTok and a national conversation on Love is Blind, because this guy was sort of shitty and like dated a bunch of girls and ghosted them, right? I looked through TikTok. No one is actually saying anything about him. All of the tea, all of the like hot piping tea is that he's kind of a shitty guy. He like dates girls and doesn't call them back. I'm sorry. Did we watch Sex and the City? Like this has been a tale as old as time. This has been going on since the 70s. Like this is dating. I'm so sorry to report that to many, many people. Yeah, Love is Blind is not good this season. It's not giving. I'm ready to wrap it up. I want to see what's going on next week with Madison and Molly and watch them terrorize the show for another couple of episodes. I don't even think that the weddings are going to be next week, but thank you guys again for listening. I'm sorry that I give you guys so many opinions this week. I think that both episodes, or all of the episodes that I talked about this week, were a little bit slow. I think that the conversation around ugliness was a little bit patchy, but read the books that I recommended because I think that they will say what I was trying to say much more eloquently. And I will also put the Pretty Problem Substack in the show notes because I think I said everything that I wanted to say very perfectly there. And it was harder for me to sort of get it out and relate it to this discourse when the answer was, again, very simple, right? It is not okay to call people ugly, guys. That is my message of the week.